Welcome to this deep dive. It's amazing you sent over these articles about the Menendez brothers case. It's one of those stories that just gripped the whole world. We're talking wealthy family in Beverly Hills, a brutal double murder, and then the trial. Oh man, it was a total media circus. We're diving into excerpts from the Wikipedia entry on Lyle and Erik Menendez, so there's a lot to unpack here.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
This case, it just keeps fascinating people even decades later. And I think it's because it goes so much deeper than just the crime scene itself. We're looking
Yeah.
at really complicated family dynamics, the psychology of the brothers, and then how much the media shaped public perception. It's really fascinating.
Okay, so let's set the scene here. 1989, Beverly Hills. Picture this, like one of those lavish mansions you see in the movies, and then bam, it's a crime scene. Jose and Keita Menendez are found murdered, and their sons, Lyle and Erik, they immediately become the prime suspects. It sounds like something straight out of like a Hollywood movie script.
It really does. The crime scene, by the way, it was absolutely brutal. Investigators, they described blood and brain matter just splattered everywhere. This wasn't just a shooting. It was an act of intense rage. Jose was shot 6 times, including once fatally to the back of the head, while Kitty was shot 10 times. Even seasoned investigators, they were shaken by the sheer violence of it.
And right after the murders, Lyle calls 911, claims that someone had killed his parents. He even suggests, get this, that it could be a mob hit. But then things get really interesting.
Yeah, that's when it starts to unravel. The brothers' alibi, that they were at a movie theater and a festival, it begins to fall apart pretty quickly. And the police get suspicious when Lyle and Erik, well, they go on this massive spending spree after inheriting their parents' fortune. Luxury cars, Rolex watches, fancy vacations, the works.
So it's almost like they won the lottery, but the prize was their parents' deaths. It's chilling.
It really was the timing of their spending spree. That's what threw up the biggest red flag for investigators. It seemed a lot less like grieving sons and more like, well, celebrating.
And this is really where the case, it takes that turn into a real life thriller. The police, they're uncovering all these inconsistencies in their stories. And then it turns out that Erik actually confessed to a friend.
Right, to his friend Craig Signorelli. He went to the police with Eric's confession. And he revealed that he and Erik, they had actually written this screenplay called Friends. And get this, it involved a son killing his wealthy parents to get their inheritance.
Whoa. Wow. Talk about life imitating art. Or maybe art predicting life. It's just eerie. But it gets even, hold on. Didn't Lyle try to delete something from his father's computer too after the murders?
You're remembering right. Lyle's friend told police that Lyle rushed back from Princeton, where he was studying, specifically to erase a new will that his father had made. Seemed like Lyle was worried that this new will wouldn't benefit him and Erik as much. So the motive, it seems pretty clear, right? Money. But, get this, the brothers, they had a completely different story to tell.
Okay, here we go. This is where I know what's coming. This is where it gets crazy. In court, they claimed they killed their parents in self-defense, alleging years of horrific abuse.
Oh yeah, this is where the case explodes. Goes from a police investigation to a full-blown media frenzy. The brothers' defense was so controversial, they claimed they had suffered years of sexual, emotional, and physical abuse, even going so far as to claim their father was a pedophile and their mother enabled his behavior. The public was instantly divided.
I vividly remember those therapy session tapes being all over the news. Was that during the first trial?
Yeah, absolutely. The prosecution fought to get those tapes admitted as evidence, and they really offered a window into the brothers' state of mind. The trials themselves were incredibly complex, with both sides presenting completely opposing stories. The prosecution argued the abuse claims were completely made up, pointing to the inconsistencies in their stories and that extravagant spending spree after the murders. The defense focused on the troubled family history, trying to paint a picture of a household filled with fear and abuse.
And the trials, if I remember correctly, they ended in a hung jury.
That's right, both of the brothers' trials. The juries deadlocked, and that led to mistrials. It just goes to show how divided public opinion was. Were they cold-blooded killers driven by greed, or were they victims of abuse driven to a desperate act? There was just no easy answer.
But then there was a second trial, right? And it had way less media attention. What happened then?
Exactly. In that second trial, they banned cameras from the courtroom, so it was a lot quieter. And this time, the juries came back with a verdict. Guilty. On 2 counts of first-degree murder. Lyle and Erik Menendez were sentenced to life in prison. No possibility of parole.
So life sentences, behind bars.
Yeah.
But it sounds like the Menendez brothers' story, it doesn't end there. They've both, actually, get this, they've gotten married multiple times while in prison. And they're still fighting to, get out. It's almost like they've become these, like, celebrities behind bars.
It is. It's pretty remarkable. Even though they're incarcerated, they've somehow managed to, build these lives for themselves. Lyle even earned a bachelor's degree in sociology through a prison program.
Mm-hmm.
But their fight for freedom, well, it's taken a kind of a new turn recently.
You're talking about that new development with the case, right? What exactly happened?
Los Angeles DA George Gascon, he's actually recommended a resentencing for the brothers. And this came after reviewing, like, a habeas corpus petition. And this recommendation, well, it comes from some new evidence. A former member of the band, Menudo, he came forward and alleges that he was raped by Jose Menendez.
Wait, seriously, that's huge. How did this come out after all these years?
It's a pretty unexpected source, honestly. Roy Russillo, the former Menudo member, he publicly accused Jose Menendez of sexual assault during an interview. It was on the Today Show. And he claimed that Jose had, drugged and raped him when he was, like, just a teenager.
That's a massive revelation. It must have sent shockwaves through the whole legal system, right?
Oh, absolutely. The brothers' lawyers, they immediately filed a motion for a new hearing. Their argument, this new evidence of abuse, it supports Erik's claims, right? And they say it could have influenced the juries in the original trials.
It makes you think, if the juries had known about this alleged assault, would they have reached a different verdict? It definitely changes things, adds like a whole new layer to the case.
It really does. And the brothers' lawyers, they're pointing to this letter that Erik wrote to his cousin back in 1988. So that's like a year before the murders, right? And in that letter, Erik describes being abused by his father.
So this could be crucial evidence in their appeal.
It could be. It's pretty significant. I mean, it suggests that Erik was already talking about the abuse before the murders even happened, which, directly contradicts that prosecution's argument that the brothers, well, they fabricated the abuse claims after killing their parents.
It sounds like D.A. Gascon is taking these new allegations seriously, right?
He is. He's said publicly that he believes the brothers, they experienced, quote, a tremendous amount of dysfunction in the home and molestation. He's even gone so far as to say that he doesn't believe manslaughter would have been, the appropriate charge in the original trial, given the premeditation involved in the murders, obviously.
Wow. So what's next? Is there a chance that the Menendez brothers, they could actually, be released from prison?
It's possible. If a judge accepts Gascon's recommendation for, a resentencing, the brothers could become eligible for parole.
After all this time behind bars, that would be crazy.
It would be a big shift. But it's important to remember that this is, just a recommendation. It's still going to be a long legal process. The judge, they need to really review all of the evidence and make a decision.
This case has just been, full of twists and turns right from the very beginning. It's impossible to predict what's going to happen next. But you know what? Let's shift gears for a second. Let's talk about the brothers themselves. What have their lives been like, in prison? They were young when they were convicted.
Well, it's remarkable.
Yeah.
But both Lyle and Erik, they've actually found love.
Yeah.
And they've gotten married while serving their sentences. Lyle has been married twice and Erik once.
It's amazing that they've been able to find, companionship, build relationships, even while being incarcerated.
Their wives, they've been really supportive. They visit them regularly. They advocate for their release.
I can't even imagine what it would be like to be married to someone serving a life sentence.
It's got to be tough.
Yeah.
Erik's wife, Tammy, she's actually talked openly about, the difficulties of their relationship, especially the lack of physical intimacy. But she's also been very vocal about her love for Erik and her belief in his innocence. She even wrote a book about it. It's called They Said We'd Never Make It, My Life with Erik Menendez.
That's serious devotion. What about Lyle? Has he talked about any of this?
He has. Lyle's given quite a few interviews from prison. He reflects on his actions. He expresses remorse for the pain he's caused.
So, even though they were convicted of this really serious crime, it seems like the Menendez brothers, they've found some kind of, some semblance of normalcy inside prison.
They have. In some ways, they have. They've participated in educational programs. They pursue their interests. They maintain relationships. with their loved ones, obviously.
And they've stayed in the public eye all this time.
That's right. People, they haven't lost interest. The Menendez brothers, they continue to generate headlines. There's documentaries, even, fictionalized accounts like that recent Netflix series, Monsters, the Lyle and Erik Menendez story.
This case, it just keeps captivating people, even after all this time. And I think it's because it just brings up so many complicated questions about family, abuse, justice, the influence of the media.
Yeah, you're right. There aren't any easy answers in this case. It's a tragedy. And it forces us to, confront these uncomfortable truths about human nature, about the complexities of family dynamics. It's complicated.
Speaking of media influence this case, I mean, it was a media spectacle, like right from the start.
Oh, absolutely. The trials, they were on TV, and the coverage, it was just nonstop. I mean, the media, they analyzed every little thing. Crime scene photos, their spending sprees, everything. It was like a ratings gold mine. Everybody had an opinion,
It's kind of, it's unsettling in a way, isn't it? I mean, the trial itself, it became this form of entertainment. And considering, how serious it all was.
Yeah, it really makes you think about, like, what role does the media play in these huge cases? Did all the sensationalism, did it get in the way of justice? It's really hard to know for sure.
And all that attention, I mean, it had to have, impacted how people saw the brothers too, right?
Oh, for sure. Some people saw them as these, like, spoiled, rich kids who, killed for money. Others felt sorry for them. They believed the abuse. They saw them as victims. It really, it divided people.
It's like I don't know, like a modern day Greek tragedy playing out for the whole country to watch.
You got it. And that's why it's still so fascinating, even now. It's about these big universal themes: family, betrayal, wealth, privilege, and all those dark secrets that can, exist even in those, like, seemingly perfect lives.
So after diving into all of this, I mean, what does it all mean? This case is still debated today, right? Were they cold-blooded or were they victims pushed too far?
Yeah, it's a tragic story. There aren't any easy answers.
Mm-hmm.
But I think this deep dive, it's given us a lot to consider
Mm-hmm.
about justice, about the effects of abuse,
Yeah.
and about, how powerful the media can be.
You've definitely given me like a lot to think about. Here's one question I keep coming back to.
Yeah.
If the abuse, if it was real, how much did it shape what they did? And if it wasn't real, then what could possibly make them go to those lengths? It's the kind of story that sticks with you.